Hello, class. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite chapters in our book, the chapter of diversity. We definitely live in a country where diversity is all around in terms of race, in terms of religion, in terms of ethnic background, in terms of culture, in terms of ideas, politics, sexuality, different abilities. So it's definitely one of the most enriching chapters that we're going to be talking about in this class. As with all of the chapters, I want to begin with a quote. And this quote is by Stephen Covey, and it states that strength lies in differences, not in similarities. I definitely am of the idea that this quote is correct. Whenever you're in a group setting, or you're in an activity or in an assignment or in anything that involves other people, we definitely do better work, or we perform best by leaning in towards the differences in others, celebrating the differences in others, and enriching ourselves by those differences, and not just looking for the similarities. That's something I want you to think about. We are getting to the end of the class, and there is definitely an aspect of personal growth where you can't grow as an individual without noticing how diverse we are as different people, and we definitely need to celebrate those differences. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about waking up to diversity. Diversity is real and valuable. Building relationships across different cultures. Overcoming stereotypes with critical thinking. Students with disabilities. Dealing with sexism and sexual harassment. And leadership in a diverse world. As with all of the chapters, there is the why, the how, the what, and the what if. The why we're studying diversity is because diversity is real and valuable and all around us. The how, as with every chapter, I would like you to skim for 3 techniques that you'd like to try this week or this month or after the class ends, but definitely try to attempt any of the techniques you learn in this chapter. The what if I could create positive relationships with people from any background or culture? That is definitely something that is a challenge to some of us. Creating positive relationships with people that come from a different culture or a different background than us and then might think differently than us in our fundamental beliefs. What if you could do that? Something that I want you to contemplate. Give me a second while I open up this video. This is a 4-minute video, a 4-minute tech talk on diversity. I'm going to let the video run so that you can hear what the video is about, and I'm going to comment on the video when it's over.
I'm a blogger, a filmmaker, and a butcher, and I'll explain how these identities come together. It started 4 years ago when a friend and I opened our first Ramadan fast at one of the busiest mosques in New York City. Crowds of men with beards and skull caps were swarming the streets. It was an FBI agent's wet dream. But being a part of this community, we knew how welcoming this space was. For years, I'd see photos of this space being documented as a lifeless and cold monolith, much like the stereotypical image painted of the American Muslim experience. Frustrated by this myopic view, my friend and I had this crazy idea. Let's break our fast at a different mosque in a different state each night of Ramadan and share those stories on a blog. We called it 30 Mosques in 30 Days, and we drove to all the 50 states and shared stories from over 100 vastly different Muslim communities, ranging from the Cambodian refugees in the LA projects to the black Sufis living in the woods of South Carolina. What emerged was a beautiful and complicated portrait of America. The media coverage forced local journalists to revisit their Muslim communities, but what was really exciting was seeing people from around the world being inspired to take their own 30 Mosques journey. There were even these 2 NFL athletes that took a sabbatical from the league to do so. And as 30 Mosques was blossoming around the world, I was actually stuck in Pakistan working on a film. My co-director Umar and I were at a breaking point with many of our friends on how to position the film. The movie is called These Birds Walk, and it is about wayward street kids who are struggling to find some semblance of family. We focus on the complexities of youth and family discord, but our friends kept on nudging us to comment on drones and target killings to make the film more relevant, essentially reducing these people who've entrusted us with their stories into socio-political symbols. Of course, we didn't listen to them, and instead, we championed the tender gestures of love and headlong flashes of youth. The agenda behind our cinematic immersion was only empathy, an emotion that's largely deficient from films that come from our region of the world. And as These Birds Walk played at film festivals and theaters internationally, I finally had my feet planted at home in New York. And with all the extra time and still no real money, my wife tasked me to cook more for us. And whenever I go to the local butcher to purchase some halal meat, something felt off. For those that don't know, halal is a term used for meat that is raised and slaughtered humanely following very strict Islamic guidelines. Unfortunately, the majority of halal meat in America doesn't rise to the standard that my faith calls for. The more I learned about these unethical practices, the more violated I felt. Particularly because businesses from my own community were the ones taking advantage of my orthodoxy. So, with emotions running high and absolutely no experience in butchery, some friends and I opened a meat store in the heart of the East Village Fashion District. We call it Honest Chops, and we're reclaiming halal by sourcing organic, humanely raised animals and by making it accessible and affordable to working class families. There's really nothing like it in America. The unbelievable part is actually that 90% of our in-store customers are not even Muslim. For many, it is their first time interacting with Islam on such an intimate level. So all these disparate projects are the result of a restlessness. They are a visceral response to the businesses and curators who work hard to oversimplify my beliefs and my community. And the only way to beat their machine is to play by different rules. We must fight with an inventive approach. With the trust, with the access, with the love that only we can bring, we must unapologetically reclaim our beliefs in every moving image, in every cut of meat. Because if we whitewash our stories for the sake of mass appeal, not only will we fail, but we will be trumped by those with more money and more resources to tell our stories. But the call for creative courage is not for novelty or relevance. It is simply because our communities are so damn unique and so damn beautiful. They demand us to find uncompromising ways to be acknowledged and respected. Thank you.
Searching for a hotel online is pretty much like this. Some deals fly right past you, and you'll never see them again. And some just don't fit.
Let's go back to our presentation. This video you just saw was from Bazam Tariq, The Beauty and Diversity of Muslim Life. I wanted to share this short video with you just to encapsulate what different cultures, different lives of Americans in the United States happen every single day. One of the beauties of college life is that you have many opportunities to engage in conversations with peers, with professors, with community members, with people that you see in the campus setting, at the library, in the classrooms, at the commons, and you can have these conversations in person or even online. We've been seeing through our discussion board post how different we are, yet how similar we are. A lot of you are students that share the same age, that share the same travel interests. If you're ever at the Mesa campus, you will find students from all colors and all religions. Mexicans, Arab, Brazilians, Chinese, Japanese, African American, white, French, Canadian, the list goes on. College life allows you to connect with people who are different or similar to you, exploring new ways of seeing your world and creating new options for you. One conversation with someone else can educate you on what it means to be Muslim, or what it's like to be Mexican, what it's like to cross the border every single day to come to campus and take a class, what it's like to grow up in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, etc. You can be educated on another person's religion, culture, or daily living habits. Some of the best parts of my day are getting to listen to my students' stories, how they came to the USA, what their culture is, and in a given day, what a Jewish girl does on a Sabbath, a day of religious observance and abstinence from work kept by Jews from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and how choosing the right classes for her was important because she would need to take classes with less homework because of her religion background, because of her religious affiliation, and what she can and cannot do on the weekends. Something to keep in mind. Diversity is real and valuable. The word culture embraces many kinds of differences. There are the cultures of the college, cultures of men and women, the culture of work, the culture of driving, the culture of people with different abilities, the culture of single parent and two-parent families, etc. Living effectively in a diverse world means remembering that many dimensions of a culture are alive in you and in the people you meet every day. But discrimination is also real. There is racism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination based on religious affiliation or even style of dress. Have you ever heard people discriminate against people who come from a culture or a background and dress as emo or goth or gothic or steampunk or hipster, punk, etc.? Each year, thousands of people have racial comments made all across America. Has it happened to you? Has it happened just simply because you're a woman? Have you ever been called a nasty woman? But diversity is valuable, even in biology. Biologists are telling us that diversity of animal species benefit our ecology. Higher education can take your experiences of diversity to a whole new level. Let's talk about one thing that your book mentions, the common daily routine for an American citizen, which is the information in front of you. Waking up in bed, an invention from the Near East, Southeastern Asia between the Mediterranean Sea and India. The bed was invented in that area. After dressing in clothes, after you wake up in bed, clothes that are possibly designed or originated in Italy, with a design in Italy. You might slice a banana. Bananas typically grow in Honduras and have their origin in Honduras. Put the bananas in a bowl that comes originated from pottery made in China. You might brew coffee that originally tends to be shipped from Nicaragua. You might even read the newspaper, printing process invented in Germany. Or that newspaper would be printed in paper, first made in China. A common daily routine for an American citizen involves aspects and inventions that were invented all over the world, not just in America. Let's talk about self-discovery. One of the things I want to talk about is building relationships across cultures.
I grew up in a fairly small town outside of Boston in a suburb, all through middle school and high school, primarily as far as race goes, primarily Caucasian.
The place I came from was a relatively small town. You're not going to have the whole sampling of the world.
The high school that I went to was set in a very wealthy area in New York. The majority of the people had a lot of money.
You have to fill in bubbles for your race, and I remember raising my hand and asking the teacher what I should put because I wasn't sure, because it said only fill in one. And I said, I just raised my hand and made it even simpler. I didn't explain my entire his family's background. I just said, my father's black and my mom is white. What should I put? And I just remember her facial expression perfectly. She leaned over, nodded really knowingly, and just tapped the black button, the black option, and just said, why don't you just put this one? And I think that was probably the first time I noticed or realized that despite how I might identify myself, that might not be how others perceive me.
Have you ever encountered something like this in your own life? I know I have. Have you ever tried to start a conversation with someone who comes from a different culture than yours and you have found yourself struggling? I acknowledge that sometimes we want to say or phrase things so correctly as to not offend that others will see us struggling to come up with the right words, and that tends to break the ice. I think, just as you heard this last girl's comments, sometimes instructors or professors, we also make mistakes. We're not perfect. Definitely going through diversity trainings and definitely going through different conversations with different professors and colleagues, and we seek out the pedagogy on how to work with students from different backgrounds. It'll make us, even as we are the professors, more approachable and better suited to teach you all that might come from different backgrounds, different than us. I have been discriminated against based on my race. I am of both Mexican and Chinese descent, as well as Spaniard. Based on looks, you could think I'm white. You could also think I'm Mexican, depending on who you're talking to. And I do remember growing up feeling discriminated against, not because of the color of my skin, but because I didn't speak Chinese and the rest of my family did, or because I spoke Spanish, but not with the Spaniard accent, which some of my other family members did. We all go through things. Communication with people from other cultures, it is a learned skill, a habit. Knowing techniques for communicating across cultures is something that's valuable, not only in college life, but also in their day-to-day life. And what gives them power is a sincere desire and commitment to create understanding. If you truly value cultural diversity, then you can discover ways to build bridges between people. Let's talk about a few of these suggestions. You have them in front of you. Let's start with self-discovery. One set to developing diversity skills is to learn about yourself and understand the lenses through which you see the world. One way to do this is by imagining yourself in a different situation than the one you are in right now, and ask yourself, say, what if I were a person of the opposite gender? Or if I were a member of a different racial or ethnic group? Do this consistently, and you'll discover that we live in a world of multiple realities. Also, think of times when you were favored because of your gender, of your race, of your age, and times when you were excluded or ridiculed based on one of these same characteristics. Learning about other cultures. People from different cultures read differently, write differently, think differently, eat differently, and learn differently than you. If you know this from the beginning, you can be more effective with your classmates, coworkers, and neighbors. Example, during a conversation in America, we have what's called personal space. But in countries like in Iran, people may often get so close that you can feel their breath. Also in China, people get very close to each other when they walk. There is no such thing as a per se personal space. In America, personal space is distance at arm's length, starting at around 18 inches. These examples could be extended to cover many areas: posture, eye contact, physical contact, facial expressions, etc. So immerse yourself, read novels, write plays, watch movies, listen to music, look at art, take a course, learn a different language. Look for differences between individualistic and collectivistic cultures. Individualistic cultures flourish in USA, Canada, and Europe. If you were raised with a family who had deep roots in one of these areas, you were probably raised to value personal fulfillment and personal success. In contrast, in collectivistic cultures, the value lies in cooperation over competition. Group progress is more important than individual progress. If you were raised in such a culture, say in Asia, Latin America, or in Africa, you were taught to respect others, do well for the family first. One example, respecting titles and last names. Although Americans often like to use first names immediately after meeting someone, in some cultures this practice is acceptable only among family members. If you were raised in a collectivistic culture and now find yourself working in America, a very individualistic culture, you might have a hard time calling your boss by their first name. I know I grew up in a collectivistic culture, and one of the culture shocks I had to get used to working in the United States was definitely calling people by their first name. In my culture, you never address an elder by their first name. But in this culture, it is the way that it's done, and you just have to adapt. Looking for common ground. If you are in the same situation as someone else, worrying about the same things, say tuition, classes, dormitory food, non-parking space, the fundamental human rights of health, food, safety, and economic security, we're all at the same level. It is easier to identify with someone else if you look for common ground. Speak and listen with cultural sensitivity. After speaking with someone from another culture, do not assume that you've been understood or that you fully understand the other person. Let's say it's someone that does not fully speak your language. Try to speak slowly, distinctly, and patiently. Avoid slang. Use gestures to accompany words, and maybe write down your message as well. Stay calm and avoid using nonverbal messages that you are seemingly frustrated at your message not being communicated. Look for individuals, not group representation. Not all Asian students are skewing the class curve. Not all Black students know how to dance and sing. These are stereotypes that we have built into our culture, and you need to look for individuals and not group representation. Be willing to accept feedback. Members of another culture might let you know that some of your words or actions had a meaning other than what you intended. Maybe a comment that seems harmless to you is offensive to them, and they might tell you directly. And speak up against discrimination. You might find yourself in front of someone who tells a racist joke, makes a homophobic comment, or utters an ethnic slur. When this happens, you have a right to state what you observed and share what you think and communicate how you feel. In response to your comments, people might apologize and express a willingness to change. It all depends on how you deliver the message. In this online class, we have a safe space to communicate those things and these manners and these feelings, but with a respectful tone and avoiding any sort of negative words. I want to encourage you all to build relationships across different cultures. I wanted to just have a slide where we talk about building relationship across cultures and sharing the same bullets that we shared in the previous slide, starting with self-discovery, looking for differences between individualistic and collectivistic cultures, looking for common ground with another person, speaking and listening with cultural sensitivity, looking for individuals, not group representatives, and also possibly finding a translator, mediator, or model so that you can learn from a different culture, develop support systems with other students, other people, be willing to accept feedback. This is a key component, I feel, in learning how to build relationships with other people who come from different cultures. Be willing to accept feedback on possibly how you say things, how they sound, how your body language says things. Be willing, be open to accept positive feedback from others. Speaking up against discrimination, we spoke about that. And you're in an institution at Mesa College where we definitely embrace diversity. We are the leading college of equity. So you're in an environment where you can make a difference. Speak out, but with a positive tone in your classes, with your professors, with other students, and let's try to make our little corner of the world more sensitive, more open, and more accepting of different cultures. Let's talk about overcoming stereotypes with critical thinking. The word stereotype originally referred to a method used by printers to produce duplicates of pages of text. When we stereotype, we gloss over individual differences and assume that every member of a group is a duplicate. Consider the following statement. College students like to drink heavily. Or, people who speak English as a second language are hard to understand. Or, Americans who criticize the country are unpatriotic. These are examples of stereotypes or generalizations made about a group of people based on the behavior of isolated group members. These assumptions are learned and can be changed. People are stereotypes based on their race, on their age, on their sex, on their ethnic group, on their religion, on their political affiliation, geographic location, birthplace, accent, job, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, IQ, height, hair color, hobbies. Do you have any of these? Of course we do. We all do. Stereotypes have many sources. It possibly is fear of the unknown, not having critical thinking patterns, having past negative encounters. You can take steps in order to free yourself from stereotypes. Let's look for some of the errors in thinking. Let's go to page 281 from our book, 15th edition. Let's talk about looking for errors in thinking. In your book, it says, some of the most common errors in thinking are the following: selective perception, self-fulfilling prophecy, and self-justification. Let's talk about these. Selective perception. Stereotypes can literally change the way we see the world. If we assume that homeless people are lazy, for instance, we tend to notice only the examples that support our opinion. Stories about homeless people who are too young or too ill to work will probably escape our attention. You might also not be paying attention to the fact that possibly that person is homeless and they might look young, but it might be because of their homosexuality or their transsexualism. Whatever the situation is, that person might have been kicked out from home. Maybe that person is a foster youth. We don't know. But we do look for selective perception, and we group people based on an idea or a stereotype. Let's talk about the self-fulfilling prophecy. When we interact with people based on stereotypes, we set them up in ways that confirm our thinking. That's what the self-fulfilling prophecy is. This is, again, when we interact with people based on stereotypes, and we set them up in ways that confirm our thinking. For example, when people of color were denied access to higher education based on stereotypes about their intelligence, they were deprived of opportunities to demonstrate their intellectual gifts. This still happens in education, sadly. There are some educators at every level that feed into the self-fulfilling prophecy. Self-justification. Stereotypes can allow people to assume the role of victim and to avoid taking responsibility for their own lives. An unemployed white male might believe that affirmative action programs are making it impossible for him to get a job, even as he overlooks his own lack of experience or qualifications. I could add a lot of different examples. I don't want to create any sort of negative feelings with this discussion. I just want to make you aware of the errors in thinking for stereotypes that we all have embedded into our beings in some form of another. And we need to be aware of these fault in ideas in thinking, because they do not feed positive ideas in any single way. Let's talk about one of the aspects in your chapter that I like, be willing to see your own stereotypes. Even people with the best of intentions can harbor subtle biases. Admitting this possibility allows you to look inward even more deeply for stereotypes. I want to say that again. Even people with the best of intentions can harbor subtle biases. Every single person in the world needs to own up to subtle biases towards race, towards religion, towards political affiliation, towards whatever the situation it can be. One of the best practices that I learned through higher education, graduate school, and in many of the conversations I had with colleagues about culture is, rightfully so, examining your own cultural biases, owning up to them, and trying to overcome them. Because you learn them from birth, you learn them from experience, you learn them through the media, but you have them in you. You are going to be doing a journal entry for this chapter. You're going to view a video, a TED Talk called The Dangers of the Single Story, and you're going to reflect on that. As you're thinking about that video and how you're reflecting on that for the journal, I also want you to reflect on what I just said about owning up to your own stereotypes, owning up to your own subtle biases. You will probably come out at a better end of the story after you reflect on your own biases and you work towards changing them. Let's talk about students with disabilities. Even the most well-intentioned instructors can forget about assisting people with disabilities, myself included. One reason is that they can vary so much. Some are visible disabilities, being paralyzed, and some are not. Students with ADHD. Some are permanent and some are momentary. Maybe a student has a broken leg after a car accident. At one time, students with disabilities faced a restricted set of choices in school. New technologies such as computers and calculators operated with voice commands changed that. So speak up to your instructors if you are dealing with any kind of disability. I welcome information from my students telling me that they might have a different ability and how can I help. At the beginning of the semester, it is always a good idea to inform your instructor about your accommodations if you've gone through disability support services. And it is a good idea to have a discussion about how your instructor can help you. Not all the time can we possibly, depending on the short amount of time, depending on how the class structure is, depending on a lot of factors, maybe accommodate 100%. But the majority of us want to accommodate 99%. Let's talk about the content of your chapter that talks about students with disabilities on pages 282 to 283 of the 15th edition. I'm going to talk about some of these. Learn the laws that apply to you. Equal opportunity for people with disabilities is the law. In the United States, both the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 offer legal protection with students with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 extends to the earlier legislation. These laws give you the right to ask for academic adjustments based on your needs. Some examples are arranging for priority registration, reducing a course load, substituting one course for another, providing note takers or recording devices or sign language interpreters. In making an adjustment, your school is not obligated to change the essential requirements for a course. For example, you can ask for extra testing time. However, your instructor is not required to change the content of the test. That's one thing that I definitely might want to make you aware of. The course content in itself cannot be changed to the extent to make 100% of the accommodations, but most of your instructors want to accommodate you 99% of the time. So that's something to keep in mind. Students who have a different ability, I want you to learn what the law says in terms of what it applies to you. Learn about the services at your school. Ask for adjustments. Use technology the best how you can make it in terms of you being a best learner for the class. Speak assertively and tell your instructor, in this case myself or any other instructor that you have in the future, what your needs are and how you can be helped. Plan ahead in terms of getting to the classroom site on time if the different ability impedes you to do so. Use empowering words as you're speaking to instructors or classmates. Ask for appropriate treatment. Follow up when necessary and take care of yourself. At this campus on the 4th floor of the Student Services Center, there is Disability Support Services. Any student that has a former IEP from high school, or if you don't, and you know that you might be suffering from a different ability and you would like some extra help with that, make sure you visit Disability Support Services on the 4th floor of the Student Services Building at Mesa College to know your rights and know what you can be expected to in terms of accommodations for your courses. Let's talk about dealing with sexism and sexual harassment, a very real situation that I hear about in my counseling office, hopefully and thankfully not as frequently as maybe it is thought about, but that I do hear about. Sexism and sexual harassment are real for instructors, for students, for staff at any campus. Incidents that are illegal or violate organizational policies occur throughout the year at schools and in workplaces. Until the 19th century, women in the US were banned from attending colleges and universities. Can you even think about that? Right now, when females are the leading percentage of educators in the country. Today, women make up the majority of first-year students in higher education, yet they still encounter bias based on gender. Although men can also be subjects of sexism and sexual harassment, of course, women are more likely to experience this form of discrimination. Bias based on gender can take many forms. Instructors might gloss over the contributions of women as they're lecturing. Students might never hear of women's contribution in history. Even the most well-intentioned people might behave in ways that hurt or discount women. Instructors might only use masculine pronouns to refer to both men and women. Career counselors hint that careers in mathematics and science are not appropriate for women. Students pay more attention to feedback from a male teacher than from a female teacher. Women are not called out in class. Their comments might be ignored, or they are praised for answering the simplest questions. Many other behaviors can be verbal or physical. There can be sexual advances, any unwanted touch, sexual jokes or gestures, or displaying of sexual material, pressure from sexual favors, etc. Specific strategies to combat sexual harassment are, and I want you all to be aware of these, point out sexist language and behavior. When you see examples of sexism, point them out. Observe your own language and behavior. Ask people to point out occasions when you use sexist statements without being aware of it. Encourage support for women, study groups for women, women's job networks, professional organizations. Through some of these networking opportunities, women can work to overcome the effects of sexism. Take action. If you're sexually harassed, take action. Tell your counselor, anybody who you trust, and start the grievance process. You can report it to any school official, administrator, campus security officer, professor, again, counselor, and the Title IX coordinator will take over. Title IX of the Education Code prohibits sexual harassment and other forms of sexual discrimination. I want you all to be knowledgeable, to have a general awareness regarding sexism and sexual harassment, and I want you to, with the best of your abilities, help reduce incidences of these behaviors by reporting these situations to the appropriate authorities. Let's talk about 8 strategies for non-sexist communication. Use gender-neutral terms whenever possible. Sometimes it is very difficult to use gender-neutral terms as we are conditioned to use more male pronoun terms. Even myself, I am guilty of at times referring to a male pronoun when I want to explain something. So as you're practicing lectures, speeches, essays, use gender-neutral terms. Use examples that include both men and women. Alternate the pronoun gender whenever possible. Maybe you want to use male pronoun genders for some examples and female pronoun genders for other examples. Switch to plural whenever possible. Consider the singular there, using that term. Avoid words that imply sexist stereotypes. Use parallel names. And visualize a world of gender equality. I think that would be the best case scenario. Visualizing a world of gender equality, trying to make that in your day-to-day activities, and hopefully step by step, student by student, professor by professor, administrator by administrator, staff by staff, slowly, and specifically at this campus where we're the leading college of equity, we can reach for equality. Let's talk about cyberbullying. For those of you who don't know cyberbullying and what it is, cyberbullying is the mere fact of receiving an email or a text message with a hostile or threatening tone. In this life with social media, with the ability to post comments anonymously, with the ability to be a part of different social networks and social links such as Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or blogs, cyberbullying is something that exists and that is real. Cyberbullying is also rumors about you that are posted on your Facebook page or other social networking profile. Getting deleted from a friend list as a deliberate attempt to upset you. An online profile that's created by someone who pretends to be you. Don't put up with cyberbullying in any form. Report it. Most of the social network sites have a report area where you can report anything that's indecent or anything that's close to negative in terms of cyberbullying. Most people call these people not just cyberbullies, but online haters. Even in online classes, professors like myself, I am monitoring moments of cyberbullying, of moments of you might in the discussion board be typing things that could be considered bullying or could be considered distasteful. Definitely don't put up with cyberbullying in any form. Report it. Stick up for yourself. Continuing with the cyberbullying, start by ignoring the harassment or getting offline for a while. If it's something that's continuous, you could possibly start by ignoring the harassment. Possibly it'll go away. Possibly it's a one-time thing. Or get offline for a while. Definitely that works. Blocking the perpetrators by changing your privacy settings on your email and text messages software. It's one of the best things you can do. Or blocking these people from your social network sites. Changing your username or password and email address used for your profiles on social networking websites or keeping them private. If you discover a fake online profile about you, contact the company that runs that website and tell them to take it down. Again, most of these sites have a report feature where you can report directly to the company. Or talk to your academic advisor or counselor at the campus health services to see what other course of action you can do depending on the degree of bullying that's happening. Let's talk about choosing your conversations and your community. When you are a student in college, you have many opportunities to engage in conversations. We talked about this a few slides ago. You can talk to peers and professors and community members. You can talk in person or online. You have choices about what type of conversations you're going to engage in. What kinds of choices do you have when engaging in such conversations? Use conversations to change habits, to connect with people who are different from you, to explore new ways of seeing the world, to create new options for yourself. When you're discussing, let's say, having conversation with other students, think about, are you active or passive when it comes to choosing the conversations in your life? Do you only choose to have conversations with people who look like you, who possibly think like you, who come from the same background? Would you like to change that? Think about it. Do you want to engage with people from different conversations that come from different cultures, that come from different backgrounds? One thing that I want you to do possibly at the end of this chapter and this lecture is to write an intention statement of something you want to try that's different from your norm, maybe before you begin your fall semester. Write an intention statement of how you're going to maybe look for someone or engage in a conversation with someone that comes from a different background than yours. If we were doing this class in a face-to-face, in a lecture setting, one of the things I would like you to try for my class would be to do an assignment for me where you would be actually seeking out and looking for someone that's different than you, having a conversation with them and reporting back, whether it would be in a speech setting, reporting back to the class, or in a small group conversation, but it would be something we would do together in class. Let's talk about one of the Power Up Now processes from your book, choosing your conversations, claiming control over your conversations. As you're going through college, pay attention to the conversations you come across during the next week. And maybe not this next week, just because you might be enthralled with assignments for this class or finals, or you might be enthralled with other aspects going on in your life. But I want you to, at some point in your career in college, to pay attention to the conversations you come across during whatever week you're in and make note of any that have these characteristics. Gossip hounds, wrapped up talking about other people, usually in unkind ways. Chronic complainers, can't find anything to be happy about or even look on the bright side. Energy drainers, those people who seem to thrive on sucking the good vibes out of the air. Opinionated arguers, absently and recently feel the need to tell you how the world should be. Or dream crashers, perhaps they don't want you to follow your dreams because they didn't follow theirs. Claim control over these conversations. Pay attention to these conversations. Now be honest and think about whether you are ever one of these conversation villains. Have you been? Do you not want to be anymore? Think about it. Let's take the conversation challenge. The next time someone starts talking bad about another person to you, resist the inclination to join in. Believe me that if you don't join in, the conversation might just end there. Another topic might come up. The next time someone voices an opinion different from yours, resist the urge to defend your beliefs and try asking different questions instead. At some point, I know we won't be doing this for the class, but with a friend, with a family member, share your results of this conversation challenge, or with your counselor, or if I see you in my counseling session, talk to me about it. Reflect on this. It's definitely one of the best things you can do to grow individually as a person. This brings us to the last slide in the diversity chapter. I want you to reflect on this challenge. You don't have to do it per se for this class, but I would like you to think about this challenge as you're going through college life, as you're going through your classes, as you're going through campus life. Something to keep in mind, something to help you grow as a person, as a student, and as a human being.